So hi everybody. So as I said, my name's Vikki and I work for the Brain Injury Association in Northland. And brain injury is also known as the silent epidemic. And we know that over 99 people a day have a brain injury in New Zealand. And so, there's no outward, so often nothing to see from the outside, and that's what makes it such a difficult thing for people to deal with. Or shall I go like this?
Yes, that's fine. Now please go on the next slide. There we go.
So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about who we are as an association, and if you come from different parts of New Zealand, there's 14 other societies throughout New Zealand and you can contact them. Some of them are known as the Head Injury Society. In Auckland it's Headway House. So the one in Whangarei was established in 1998, so we're an incorporated society and we do have a national body. We get about 10% of our funding from the government, and that's it, which I was complaining to our government officials last week at the meet the candidates. So we're very heavily reliant on grants and donations. It says there we have 2 liaison officers, but at the moment there's just myself. There used to be 3 of us, but due to all this funding stuff, there's just myself. So we cover from Wellsford to the Cape up here, and our service is really about support, information, and just walking beside somebody. And we try and do injury prevention work because hopefully that's going to cut the numbers down a little bit. Thank you. Next. So as I say, we're assisting people with brain injuries really just to stop things escalating because things are likely to get out of control. And so we have, we're just there to support people at different appointments, help with paperwork, and as some of you will know, that's just because of all the ongoing things that people can't see. So people's expectations of what people are capable of can be different from what can actually happen. And we know brain injuries of any sort are life-changing. Different types of brain injuries. You know that everybody knows about trauma, and of course some of those people do have scars to prove what's happened to them. So the biggest type of brain injury actually comes from people falling over. Most people would say crashes, but it's actually from falls. Then crashes come sort of shortly after that. But we also know there's strokes, there's aneurysms, there's infections, meningitis. Lots of you people, it's about those hypoxic events, so that lack of oxygen to your brain, tumours, shingles, and more recently, COVID-19. You've heard people perhaps talking on TV about their ongoing fatigue, their brain fog, and things like that. So we also know that COVID-19 is causing some issues for people in their brains, but drugs, alcohol, pesticide, gases, solvents, and for people from a wee while ago that were busily painting houses and things with lead-based paints, also got ongoing issues, invisible and really hard to prove. But we get there. That's what it's all about. So researchers say for heart bypass procedures, it's a major surgery and it incorporates lots of different things, and different things can happen. And from listening to who's here tonight, I would say that some of you are much more onto this than me. I was said to these ladies, I've got 2 people that have had a hypoxic event, but neither of them were from having any heart surgery. But a colleague of mine in Dunedin has several. And the other thing about brain injury is that, for children, your brain is changing all the time and it goes through several major changes in your lifetime. And often, recovery happens quite well as a child, And it's not until they're later at school and being told that they've got behavioural issues and other things going on. And sometimes people need to be reminded that perhaps there could be a brain injury at the back of that, rather than putting them in a box. And so it's something just for people to think about. You know, brain injuries is a relatively new thing to talk about. I know for even for trauma, until the late 80s, it wasn't a recognised injury. If you look at the World Health Organization and different places like that, cognition is not a disability. And so for people with brain injuries that haven't got them from trauma, it can be really difficult to get any sort of support for people. It's getting better now and it's more recognised now, but it wasn't for a very, very long time. And I think because of the fact that it goes on for your life is another reason why people don't actually want to recognise it, because it's a very expensive thing for them to have to look after for a lifetime. So that's why it can be an uphill battle. And just doing that proof thing, you know, if things aren't written down, they never happened, all those types of things. So there's a big battle for lots of people when it comes to brain injury. So thank you. So if we look at our brain and the oxygen, so the brain's only 2% of our whole body weight. However, it consumes 20% of the oxygen carried by the blood. And so if that gets interrupted for just 2 or 3 minutes, things in your brain start to die. And also when you think about that, that's around that energy. When I think it was Kylie was talking about her fatigue and things, your brain just isn't able to make the amount of energy that it needs. And a lot of that's done at night time when you're wanting to go to sleep and you go into your delta sleep to make your glucose. Often your brain doesn't go down into that deep sleep, or it just doesn't stay there long enough to give you and get you enough petrol to get through the day. So by about lunchtime, you're starting to feel a bit worn out and things start to go a bit downhill. So yes, so I'm hoping that you're all coming up with lots of questions, because I think some of these other people that are here are going to be able to answer them for you. So in the next one, please. So I just thought I'd bring in a picture of the brain so you can see how your brain works or doesn't. So most of the clients that I get to work with long term have been through crashes, because that's that frontal lobe stuff, and it gets them into a lot of trouble because they're a bit got a short fuse and are a bit spontaneous. However, with hypoxic events, you never quite know which part of your brain might have been damaged. And well, with every brain injury, every single one is different, and we never know the outcome of any of them. Somebody can have a very mild injury, they could just fall over and be told that they've got a mild concussion. However, they might have lifetime ongoing effects compared to someone that's been in a massive crash and being told that they've got a very serious brain injury. They can make quite a good recovery. So you never can say to someone, well, this is what's going to happen because this happened. So if you look at the different parts of your, like for the frontal lobe, the thing there is normally about people have personality changes or odd behaviour. They can't think as quickly and they can't concentrate. So if you're at school, that can be a problem. Can't sit still in school, in your classroom. They might have difficulty talking about what they actually want, and they're not always that flexible in their thinking. Your parietal lobe at the back there, so that's all about your temperature gauge, processing language, and you might have difficulty reading and writing, so that's all your language things. And sometimes that's around knowing that spatial things. You don't know, can't always see 3D, and know where things are in the world. Things might not be where you think they are. They might just be a little bit off to the right or the left. All your vision is there at the back of your head. So you can have nothing wrong with your eyes, but not be able to see properly. And then, of course, all your balance and coordination and your temporal lobes, which is where your short-term memory and all those things that you want to remember for long-term, that's where they go before they get stashed into your long-term memory. And so understanding what you're hearing and being able to put problems in the right order and sort things out a bit. And then, of course, all those reflexes, your breathing and cardio stuff up through your brainstem. So that's kind of like your fibre optic. It does everything without thinking. And so if anything happens to that, that's when things go a bit wrong. And if, of course, you have any damage to your brainstem, you'll be unconscious. And also that changes all your muscle tone and things like that as well. And you have poor coordination. So whiplash injuries as a traumatic one would be something that causes some of those things. Yeah, so that's sort of your brain. And of course, all those things do lots of else, but those are the main jobs in those areas of the brain. In your computer. So next one.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I did put my hand up. I don't know if that can come out. Can I just ask you something? So, with that last photo you had, the different parts of the brain that affected different areas, so like if different parts were damaged, there would be, you know, like the frontal lobe would affect concentration and thinking, and there were other things as well, and then the temperature gauge was in another thing, and then short-term memory was another part.
Yes.
So for me, I can pick out of all of those things, I can pick out certain things from about 3 different places, but I don't match to one full place. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
so like the frontal lobe, I won't meet all of those things, but I definitely struggle with concentration and thinking for long periods of time. And then I definitely struggle with temperature gauge. I'm either freezing cold or hot as hell. And then the short-term memory is something that I struggle with as well. But not all of them come under one area. So why is that?
That's because you've had an hypoxic event, and that means that several parts of your brain, it's like it's a broad thing of your brain. If you think of you having a crash or a fall, there's a specific impact of where you usually hit. But when you have a hypoxic event, it can do all sorts of parts of your brain. It's not
several parts. Several parts are damaged, not just one part.
No, that's right. And even if you say that someone has frontal lobe damage, it doesn't mean that they have all those things.
Okay.
And you know, if you think of someone in a crash, they often have short-term memory and the frontal lobe stuff, but also short-term memory and all those other things. They can have visual things. They might be blind, but there's nothing wrong with their eyes. And the same when you talk about heat and things. So, but
so you can have,
you
can have a little bit from each part. So you could have one thing from there, one thing from there, and one thing from there to make up one thing.
And if somebody was saying to me that they had a hypoxic event, I would expect them to have several different areas of their brain impacted.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Thanks.
That's all right. So, when I was told that this was going to probably end up on a website, that's why I've probably written a bit more than I normally would. So the first part of having a brain injury is often it's the person that has got the injury, whatever it might be, they might have no awareness or insight on it. It might be because other people are telling them that something's wrong. And but you know, you can fail to pick up those social cues, be inappropriate because you're just not reading things as you might do. Lots of emotional changes, which, you know, is understandable because there's a lot of grief and things that goes with all these, but people can be very tearful or laugh at all the wrong things. And a lot of what happens afterwards can also depend on what that person was like pre-injury. So it might just exacerbate some of their personality traits, and it's not always the good ones. So, you know, loss of that control, being a bit unpredictable and mood swings. So if I, you know, a lot of people just say, they wouldn't be able to say they've got a brain injury, but they'd say something like, I just don't feel right. So unless you said to them, how's your memory? What's your sleep like? What's your mood like? Are you light sensitive? Can you listen to lots of noise? What do you like in a crowd? Lots of different things like that. There's lots of things you can ask people, and then they might be able to answer that, but they wouldn't be able to tell you themselves that that's actually the problems that they were having. Often very irritable, fairly intolerant of everything, short-tempered, and anxiety can be something because you don't really know what's happening, and just a lack of understanding and feeling really uncertain about stuff. Depression is common, but not, and I know this even from people, I think when you hear about people having heart attacks and things, depression is something that follows quite a bit, but it's not a depression like we would talk about people under mental health. It's just sort of, it's just a depression in that you're not so motivated and can't quite get yourself together, and you can feel a bit sad, but not, it's not a depression like we would normally think of depression. Some people get a little bit egocentric, love to be the centre of attention, and become a little bit disinhibited. We've talked about, you know, that difficulty with learning new things and being able to get them to stick. And, you know, people are seen as lazy and not getting on with things. They could tell you exactly what they need to do. They just don't quite know where to start. And so a lot of working with these people is about, they know what they want to do, so it's about giving them the steps and breaking it down, and then away they'll go and do something. They just can't get it. So you could ask someone, how do you make a sandwich? They would tell you exactly how to make a sandwich, and then you might say, okay, how about you go and make me a sandwich? And then suddenly they're stuck. So you'd say, so what was the first thing you said that you needed to do? And it might be, I'll go and get the bread out. And you just take it, you just break it right back down again for them. And so it's not that they're being slack or anything, they're just stuck. And it can be really simple little things. And so yeah, so just to help people and writing things down and just writing a list. I remember when I first started doing some of this about 20 odd years ago, and you'd think that you'd written a list to tell somebody how to do something like a recipe or something like that, but usually there were about another 20 or 30 steps for them to be able to do it. That would be just how you would normally do it yourself. Yeah. So it's just thinking that maybe there's a little bit more to what we need to do here. And just that thing about attention and concentration, and, you know, it's a big family adjustment for people. Because, you know, there's no books about this is what's going to happen. There's lots of ideas, but not necessarily what you're going to be having to deal with. Someone asking a question? No?
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that I think is really important for everybody when it's coming to this, because you can get very involved in caring for someone or being with someone. People give up their jobs and all sorts of things to be able to support someone through these journeys. And so you are allowed to have some time out. And, you know, because if you're burnt out and not coping, then you're not going to be any good for anybody. And so it's really important that, I guess, as you go along, that you make a plan rather than when you're at the end of your tether or already there. And you know, it's okay to take a rest when everybody else is resting, about eating meals and, you know, not going to the vending machine if you're up at the hospital and things. Try and do some exercise each day, even if it's just a small walk or something. It's about getting that oxygen going around your body, and just keeping life as normal as possible if you've got other children and things like that, to be able to think about how they can help. Allow other people to help you, and talk about how things are going. There are people around to support everybody. You know, delegate. Don't feel that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Be happy that someone can get out there and feed the dog, or take your children out, or do something with you. Yeah, look after yourselves. Yes, please. I'm not sure how many more I've got. I didn't put many in because I'm hoping you're all going to ask questions and talk to each other.
Kylie had another question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, like, I cope fairly well. I
Yes.
mean, there's definite. I mean, I definitely have a brain injury. There's absolutely no disputing the diagnosis that I had done. As I definitely agree with it and suffer the fatigue. But I work full time as an early childhood teacher, and I have done for the last over 20 years. But something I really want to do is be a head teacher, so a supervisor of a room, which comes with a lot of responsibility, obviously, for young children's lives. And not only that, it's responsible for other staff and programming and all of that, and taking on board what parents are saying. I've had a go at being acting head teacher when people have been away. The company I work for know that I've suffered a brain injury and are very supportive of me, and they're awesome, but they don't yet have the confidence in me to actually take the job in a permanent role. And to be honest, I'm not confident in myself yet, because I really struggle with especially things like that aren't everyday things. Like, there might be an event happen and I'll get really overwhelmed with what's going on and not be able to think clearly, and literally the room will start spinning around and someone will ask me a question and I'll just want to tell them to get lost because I cannot think straight. And I know that it's fatigue, and it's just the most hideous feeling that I almost want to cry, because I'm just like, want to throw everything and say I can't cope with this, and then I'm like, no, you've got to learn a way if you want to get there. And what can I do to get around it? How can I achieve what I want, and give my employer the confidence in the fact that I can do it, so that I get the job?
Yes. So I take it that would always be a full-time job, would it, Kylie?
Yes.
Or to be able to do it part-time?
No, I'm a full-time teacher, and if I stepped up to head teacher, it would be full-time, 40 plus hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there any way you could do it less than that?
No. You're either the job or not the job.
Okay. So, well, up here, if you were up here with me, I would probably be making a referral. At our hospital, we have a community rehab service. Whereabouts are you?
North Shore, Auckland.
So I'm not sure what they have in Auckland, because it's a different DHB. But up here we have, it's called the Community Assessment and Rehab Services. And they have occupational therapists there.
Yeah.
And sometimes a psychologist. And I guess it would be about seeing if there was such a thing in Auckland, and being able to say to them, I just need someone to come and give me some ideas and some support to try and learn some new techniques and ways to do things, because this is what my goal is.
Okay.
Have you had that sort of thing in the past?
I did 6 weeks of occupational therapy quite a few years ago. It was helpful, but I probably would need to do more. I carry a notebook with me whenever I start anything new. Like I've just begun at a new childcare centre, so I wrote down the routine. The first day I got there, I bailed up the first person in the room that I worked in that I could find. She thought I was an absolute nutter and said, I've got to write down the routine step by step by step, every 5 minutes of what I've got to do. She looked at me like I was nuts, and I said, no, if you don't let me do this, I'll drive you nuts, because I'll be asking you continuously what I'm supposed to be doing. And I wrote down the routine word, for every, 5 minutes of it. And it was great, because one of them came up to me later in the day and said, gosh, you're so onto it. You know what to do, don't you? And I'm like, God, I'm looking at my book like 24/7. And she's like, oh, we should get other people to do this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I have to. And I kept that book with me for the first 3 weeks, I think. And I still refer to it now. I mean, I'm doing pretty well now. But they just didn't realise what I would have been like if I hadn't. I would have driven them nuts and myself nuts. But it's just, so that works with routines and stuff. But it's more so when parents come in and give information about their child that I then have to relay to a staff member that I can't write down word for word. And then they'll say, well, what did she say you were meant to do? What? And I think, I don't know. And then I just feel stupid because I know she's told me to do something, but I can't remember what the heck it was. Especially if it's describing the way to do something. Like you've got to give the child medicine and there's a set of instructions. It's gone by the time she's finished, not even finished telling me what I need to do. I've lost the first bit. And that's something that I need to be responsible for in that position. So how to get around that.
I'm just wondering in this day and age, because there's lots of sort of computer programs and things for phones and all sorts of things, and I'm wondering whether there's some sort of a recording device that you could have.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not up enough, but if you saw an occupational therapist, then they should know what is around, or someone like CCS Disability Actor.
Yeah.
I would just be asking, because because in the past we've got special computers and things to help people that have been studying that they can talk to, so that they don't have to write so much and all sorts, there's things like that. And I know it's changing all the time. So there just might be something that you could use in your work.
Okay.
That's not overly obvious or whatever. But the other thing for the occupational therapist is that they can also come and talk with your work and talk about, because it's a learning thing for everybody. Yeah. And I wonder about your fatigue. Do you have a rest in the middle of the day or anything?
Just normal half-hour lunch break, which turns into 20 minutes by the time you get out the door. But
because we have people that sleep in their cars and all sorts of things.
Oh no, I don't do that. But I certainly stay up all night. I think you mentioned that, but not being able to sleep. Oh yeah, that's normal. I stay up all night and then get up at 6 to go to work. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, sleep is another issue for some people.
Yeah.
To help that.
So that's why I was asking about whether she has a break in the middle of the day, because most people, if they don't sleep at night, is because their brains are chock-a-block and not shutting down. They're usually ruminating about everything, and but you'll find if you had a rest in the middle of the day, even if it was 20 minutes here or 20 minutes there, that it just lets all the rubbish fall out, and you can get back to the bullet points.
Yeah.
And so that might be why you're not sleeping so well at night. Do you do any sort of relaxation?
You'll probably say it's not, but I play games. My phone, I know that's probably not very good for the eyes, or I do those like adult colouring in books. I find that quite relaxing. And sometimes I'll like exercise is relaxing, like I'll walk quite a lot, but even then I find that winds me up a bit because I've exercised and moved around and I come bouncing home sort of thing.
Oh, look, there's somebody's just put up about Workbridge.
Yes, I've rung them before. They kind of gave me the run around, but yeah, I could try them again. It was a few years ago.
Yes, I think they're a bit fussy about who they help. They'll be thinking you've got a job, so they can't get their money if you've already got a job.
Yeah, well,
but they might have some ideas about what's available to you as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so really, because it is about pacing yourself, and if you can keep things pretty much the same each day, which is really boring.
No, I find
the routines take the stress off, and it means you're not thinking about other things. You just do those bits, and then it leaves more space. Yeah.
Yeah, I like predictable routines where I don't have to think too much.
Yeah. So I mean, you're jotting things down, which is a biggie, but also it's just about having that plan. But I think because of the work that you do, there's probably, besides the fact that the children are unpredictable, the routine for school is probably fairly similar each day.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Once I've got it, I've got it. And it's pretty the same each day.
Okay. Yeah, but I would just be upskilling the people that you work with. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, ask, Alison from the Brain Injury Association in Auckland. She might come and talk to them about brain injury, or otherwise the occupational therapist should be able to do that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do something with the children around brains. Have you seen the brain hats?
The what? The brain hats? No.
You can print off brain hats and they colour them in. Some of them have what the different parts of the brain do, and they colour them, and then they make looks like a little skull hat. But there'd be things that you might be able to do with young people too, because they quite like learning about stuff like that.
They do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd get those other people. So it's about using your brain to protect your body. So a lot of this is around wearing our safety belts and things, but it's also about the fact that people are learning all the time. Speak up if things aren't going right and talk about them. I know from my experience that lots of people with brain injury don't want to talk about it because everybody thinks they're a bit mad or they've got mental health issues. But we're always learning, and I think studying the brain, it's actually quite a new thing. And when I was sort of looking at hypoxic issues and things, there's very little about it except that they say that they're now much more aware of it and they need to do more about it. And we all know that, because even with concussion and what's that new one called, the CTF, the one that they can't see it unless people have died, but the rugby players and everybody through lots of concussions and things like that, they're now aware of all those types of things. And I think this is what's probably terrifying them, really, is that brain, the brain is who you are, and there's a lot more going on. I was going to show you a picture because you'd probably like this, Kylie. I should have put the slide up. Can you see it? This is what your journey, they think it would be like, but the bottom one is what it's actually like.
Yeah. Wow. I can see it, yeah.
Your plan to the runway, but actually it's got lots of pitfalls in it.
Yeah.
So has anybody else got anything else to add? I know I've done it sort of fairly generic, but that's kind of brain injury. It's kind of the same for everybody.